Hello and welcome. We are watching us here on a fresh new season of Mad About Markets. Yes, we're back. I'm Manglam. With me as always, Ritu. We're still mad about markets. It is season 3. And thank you for giving us the love that you did in the last 2 seasons.
Well, thank you for that and welcome back to you to Manglam. You know, we've been speaking about the innumerable opportunities that India as a country presents and therefore the growth of all of these industries that we've been charting over the last 2 seasons. But how about we talk about India itself, because India is now at 75.
What timing to speak about it. The 75th Independence Day of India, and we are talking about India at 75 being on top of mind.
And what is India at 75? Well, let these charts speak for themselves. So we'll begin with India's growth story. For the last few decades, India's GDP has been growing faster than the global average and among the fastest among its peers in the emerging market category. We are now a 147 lakh crore economy at constant prices. This with a population of over 136 crores. Now, India's population stood at less than 36 crores in 51 when the first census was held, and it is estimated that India is going to be the most populous country in the world and overtake China by next year. Of course, there's both pluses and minuses to that, but that brings us to our GDP per capita, or the economic output of one person, to over 1 lakh rupees. Now, India may be the 5th largest economy, but in per capita terms, we lag behind.
Well, we do, but the number of people that there are, you know, it's difficult to put that per capita number there. But we're a $3 trillion economy now, waiting to be $5 trillion by 2025. That's the goal.
$5 trillion by 2025 is absolutely the goal. But, you know, if you look at the components of the GDP now as we stand, now we've been a consumption-driven economy throughout because of the large number of people that we are, and the contribution of investments, foreign trade, government spendings has also increased manifold over the course of the years. Now, what is GDP? Now, GDP is the sum total of consumption, of government spending, investment, and your net exports minus imports. And as you see, it's all been growing, and especially the government spending recently, thanks to COVID, has significantly increased.
Well, that's what the GDP consists of. But the GDP is also a bunch of industries put together. We've come a long way in India from being an agriculture-driven economy during the independence to a more balanced contribution now. Just take a look at this. In 1951, 62% of our GDP was agriculture. Now that number's come down to 16%. We're balanced. Manufacturing has increased from 9% to about 18%. Financial services has increased manifold as well, thanks to the Indian banking system. However, you know, as one sees, there's still a huge opportunity in manufacturing given the recent PLI schemes and the government's thrust on Make in India. Another way perhaps to increase this contribution and sweat the demographic dividend that Ritu spoke about, 136 crore Indians, would mean by ensuring more employment opportunities for Indians. Unemployment, that has been hovering between 6 to 8% in recent times, and in that, urban unemployment has been much higher than rural unemployment. States like Haryana, Rajasthan, the unemployment is near 30% as per CMIE, and you still have big states like Bihar, Jharkhand, Telangana having unemployment in double digits. Ritu, that is a concern that needs to be fixed.
And it's gotten even worse during the pandemic, and the plight of women is far worse than men. So that is a huge problem for India as a country to tackle.
We will talk about that in just a bit, but you know, the median age of India is post-1991.
Yes.
1991 is actually the biggest inflection point for India. It was the year of liberalization. India's GDP since 1991 has grown 11 times. So in that period, it's grown faster than what it has in the previous many years. And as we speak, you know, the GDP per capita too has crossed the important $2,000 mark. We're now the 5th largest economy in the world by absolute GDP and 3rd largest by purchasing power parity. No mean feat.
Well, joining us now to talk about the past, the present and the future of India, now at 75, are 2 very special guests. Sanjeev Sanyal, an economist and currently member of the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister. Also joining us on the show, Sriram Balasubramanian, an economist and author whose latest book, Kautilyanomics for Modern Times, seeks to provide a structure and context for Kautilya's economic thoughts and examine his work's relevance in today's times. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here. Sanjeev, let me begin with you. India at 75, what to your mind is the biggest success and the biggest failing for India when you see it today?
Well, I think our biggest success is remaining a united democracy that has, while we have not perhaps succeeded on the economic front as far as we should have, I think nonetheless, creating a vibrant democracy of our kind, and even along the way with its shortcomings, even creating an economy that is broadly inclusive, that has definitely seen many leaps and bounds in various fields from science and technology, and even in sports more recently. So I think the steady growth of this nation on different and multiple grounds, that has been our greatest success, keeping the whole thing together. Remember, when we started out, there were more than enough naysayers who were of the opinion that we just wouldn't be able to do it, that we would all scatter into small warring states or something like that.
All right, Sriram, let's bring you in. You've been doing your research on Kautilya, and as a country that was a major contributor to the world GDP in the early stages, what, to your mind, would Kautilya do to go back to increasing India's global contribution in today's age?
So Kautilya would do three things in my view. First, I think he would focus on the ease of business, because that's something which throughout the Arthashastra, he tries to sort of promote business enterprises and trade through a variety of measures. So I think that would be one sort of angle which Kautilya would look at to sort of enhance the growth potential of any particular country. The second thing would be the idea of equitable growth. As countries grow more and more, there is a sense of a need for equitable growth. And the idea of Matsya Nyaya, which Kautilya proposed quite significantly, he would, in that regard, he would focus on sort of ensuring that the big fish doesn't really engulf the small fish. So the idea of equitable growth is something which Kautilya would pursue, in my view. And thirdly, the resolution of contracts and implementation of labor contracts, legal prescriptions and judicial processes. I think Kautilya had a focus to ensure that these things were resolved so that businesses could sort of go about their business in an effective manner. So that is something I think would really enhance the growth potential of the country from Kautilya's point of view.
Well, those are the three things that Kautilya would do. But Sanjeev, we were looking at the GDP contribution. What's your prognosis of the contribution coming in from manufacturing? Yes, it increased from 9% in the 50s to around 17% now. It's still not enough, right? How do you think it can be improved?
Even though we have kind of removed a lot of the license permit baggage, it took a very long time for us to simply restructure whatever was left in order to be competitive. The good news is that whatever is left today is reasonably competitive. We did manage to ultimately build a competitive automotive industry. There are certain parts of engineering and pharmaceuticals where we are globally competitive. So we have finally been able to re-churn that. But it's taken almost 2.5 decades, 25 years to restructure it and become competitive. What we now have is actually reasonably good. Now the question is to scale it. So I think this is the context in which, for example, things like the PLI scheme have to be seen, our efforts to bring in new areas, for example, the drones and so on, into the manufacturing to grow. Now, in this context, let me say that our success in the services sector will now finally begin to pay off even in manufacturing. Because unlike till very recently, our services export sector was by and large, things like back office outsourcing and so on. I'm not demeaning that, but it was still not in the area where we were at the cutting edge of things. Finally, we are beginning to move into design and cutting edge activities in the services sector. Now that will now allow us to begin to be able to do cutting edge things in manufacturing as well.
All right, a long way to go there. But Sriram, how does the economic idea and framework of Kautilya's times apply to today's India and its policy making?
The entire premise of Kautilyanomics is that the idea of the Arthashastra, the Artha in the Shastra, essentially has been under sort of researched. And I propose this theory of Dharmic capitalism, which is what, in my view, Kautilya pursued as a sort of an intellectual framework or an economic framework, which sort of helped to enhance his kingdom and the progress during the modern times. So this constitutes, the idea of dharma being foundational towards economic progress, with focus on ethics, responsibilities, and also communal and social harmony as foundational to that, which leads to macro sort of principles of wealth creation, a rule enforcing state, and also sustainable growth and welfare. I think the idea is to have dharma as sort of a foundational principle based on which the state and the market, both of them, can sort of work in tandem. So and dharma serves as sort of a self-correcting mechanism from a Kautilyan sort of worldview, and I think that applies to a lot of that principle applies to a lot of contemporary issues as well.
I take your point on policy making and also Sanjeev's earlier point on services actually now reflecting in manufacturing as well. But Sanjeev, it seems like the global rating agencies are not buying this India story because our rating still remains at BBB minus.
Well, first of all, the multinational agencies clearly recognize what's going on, because the IMF and virtually every other multilateral agency has, they look at their GDP growth forecast for this year and next year. We are not only the fastest growing major economy in the world, we are almost double or that of the next competitor, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, we are expected to grow at 7 point something percent this year. And I think the next person is China, which is at little less than 4. So we are we are clearly expected to grow fast this year and next year. And so I don't think the global agencies are not thinking about us positively. As far as ratings is concerned, yes, those tend to be lagging indicators, as you very well know. And so by the time we are upgraded on those fronts, I can assure you it will be pretty obvious to everybody that we have already performed.
I'll take your point on that, Sanjeev. The rating agencies have lagged in their ratings as against the real-time fundamentals. But hang in there, just hold on to your thought, because we'll come back to you in just a bit. The Indian startup scene is, the one that really needs our attention at India at 75, because that's the one place that has been on fire and it's only picking up pace. From having its first unicorn just about 11 years ago in 2011, India now has the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. After United States, which has around 450 unicorns, and China around 300, India has over 100 unicorns collectively valued at over $340 billion. So we have a century of unicorns, and we here on Mad About Markets did allude to that when we had around 40, 42. Not gloating, but India has jumped 28 spots to be ranked 19th among the 100 countries in the list of top 100 startup hubs of the world in 2021. This is according to a report by Startup Blink. The same report had actually ranked India the previous year at the 48th position. So big leaps and bounds have been made, Ritu?
Big leaps and bounds have been made, and a lot of these companies have recently also gone public. So now they also are responsible to shareholders, and profitability is a big question mark.
And they're losing a fair amount of money for those investors.
A fair amount of money, right? So of course you give them a few years, but now they have other, they have things to prove now that they are listed companies. And Sanjeev, that is the next question to you. Yes, we're home to over 100 unicorns, these new age, fired up entrepreneurs, but can we truly call ourselves a startup nation given the meltdown that we've been seeing recently?
First of all, if you are going to be a startup nation, you've got to get used to the idea of taking risks. And this requires that some of those will go wrong. So to say that, so many startups are failing, that is no argument at all. You should expect a very large number of them to fail. If they are not failing in large enough numbers, it means they're not taking risks enough risks. So I think we need to get out of this entire mentality of, sick industries, bad, kind of thing.
Well, yes, there's always the risk of failure, but jobs are at stake here and so is investor as well. So that debate rages on. We have talked about the growth. We've talked about the startup nation, but we have to take a short break here because up next, we're going to focus on some of the other important parameters. Financial inclusion, for one, has it really worked?
And at the same time, we'll also discuss the role of digital revolution and its impact on Indians, what it can do for our next 75 years. Welcome back. You're watching us here on a brand new season of Mad About Markets. And what better to talk about at the start of the show than India at 75. We've been talking about various aspects of the nation, but let's talk about the smartphone business as well, because that's been one truly transformative journey. We here on Mad About Markets have spoken about smartphones, haven't we? So let's talk about the number of smartphones that we have and the number of mobile phone users. 1.14 billion Indians who use mobile phones, with a significant chunk now in rural India. And it is expected that by 2025, rural India will have more internet users than urban India. And our data consumption is increasing as well. From under 3 GB just a few years ago, India now consumes more than 3 times data, 11.5 GB per month as of FY21, which has only increased in FY22. And with the recently concluded 5G auctions, it's likely to grow by leaps and bounds.
It will grow by leaps and bounds. And the other thing, Mangalam, that we've been talking about when we talk about digital India is the phenomenal story.
What have we not spoken about?
Well, there are a few things that are yet to come, so don't tune out yet. The unified payment interface, and what a phenomenal story that has been, right? So as recently as 2011, according to RBI data, the average number of digital transactions in India stood at around 6 per year. Now, of the 1 crore small retailers and medium and small businesses in the country, only a minuscule adopted e-payment facilities, and moreover, more than 14 crore families have not even been integrated into the formal banking fold. Now, cut to today, and India is clocking in almost 6 billion transactions. That is by volume, and in terms of value, that's more than 10.14 trillion. Now, in a country like India, where access to formal finance remained a challenge, we were able to open more than 45 crore Jan Dhan accounts, that is with low balances, where the total deposits have now accrued to over 1.72 lakh crores. Now, this is bringing the previously unbanked population under the fold of formal finance. But of course, we still have a long way ahead to go. The combined market cap of all listed companies in India, Mangalam, that has crossed a remarkable 261 lakh crores and more than 9 crore, almost 9 crore demat accounts.
Almost 9 crore demat accounts, and would you believe it that half of them came in ever since the pandemic began?
Yeah.
We've been talking about the equity cult in India, which is growing, etc.
The new age investors.
Yes, the new age investors. That's also something that we've spoken about. But, the equity cult in India is growing, and how it just makes you feel happy that a lot of previously, people who were out of the formal finance sector or out of the wealth creation journey are now part of it.
Well, that is India at 75, and if not that, well, Sanjeev, let me bring you in again to talk about that. Is it time now for India, after having achieved all of this and where we've placed ourselves on the global map, we're still tackling with the issues of poverty, with low income. Is it time now to consider schemes like a social security scheme, a universal basic income? What kind of policy priorities should the government have now?
First of all, there has been some reports suggesting that the Prime Minister's Economic Council has been advocating universal basic income. That is not the case. I have always stated this, and so has the chairman of the Prime Minister's Economic Council, that we are not in favor of universal basic income. Much better is to target the poor with efforts such as the Ujjwala scheme, or direct transfers of benefits in various ways, insurance, the Swachhata Abhiyan, the building of toilets, or the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, building houses. So point is targeted support, not a general universal basic income.
All right, you're talking targets, and you're talking about a targeted activity towards removing poverty and not a general universal basic income. But let's cut to the chase, Sanjeev. If you could give us 3 policy measures for the immediate, medium and long term for India, what would they be?
The next 25 years is about getting the Indian state to deliver the things it should be doing. Those are things, for example, like the delivery of justice, and enforcement of contracts, which of course the government doesn't do, the judiciary has to do. And I would argue this is the single biggest reform, if it had to be done over the next decade or so, has got to be to get the Indian legal system to deliver on enforcement of contract and delivery of justice. This is absolutely critical. Next, we need to do administrative reforms. Our administrative system is not set up for service delivery. It is basically set up for enforcement of law and order, which is a good thing also. That too is an important thing. But it is not set up to deliver services. So this change, the service mentality, requires certain administrative reforms. Many reform commissions have been set up. This is much debated. But slowly but steadily, some steps are being taken in that direction.
All right, take that point, the 3 goals that you've given. But Ritu, I haven't asked you. 75 years of India. You've lived a large chunk of that. No, but
little less than you.
Little less than me. Okay. But what do you think has been our biggest achievement?
I think what I admire about India at 75 is how the modern and the traditional blend so well together. I mean, we're known for our yoga as much in the world as we are known for our unified payment interface, for being a digital leader. So I think that for me is quite fascinating. What about you?
You know, I'll take away from, you said yoga being known in the world.
Yeah.
That actually has been the biggest achievement. Back in the day, I don't remember Indians succeeding a lot at the global stage. There were a few stray athletic events or something of that sort. Maybe the 1983 World Cup that took place, etc. as well. But now,
look how the situation has flipped, right? Because the face of the global tech industry, in fact, forget the tech industry, the global corporate industry is changing, and at the helm of this change are Indian CEOs who are relentlessly working their way up to disrupt industries. You know, from what do you have? Sundar Pichai at Google to Leena Nair at Chanel. Indian origin CEOs are leading from the front.
Yeah, you have Ajay Banga, you have Indra Nui, who's retired, of course.
Yeah.
So Indians are all over the world right now. They're leading, and Indian talent is respected, right?
Yeah, and that is something to be proud of. But also at the same time, you know, why are Indians in India not building these kind of huge companies here? Why are they leaving shores to do that?
We will talk about that in just a bit with Sanjeev. But, you know, I'm just looking at this, the frame that we have right now with the kind of names that we have. What a hall of fame that this is. But let's move on to reality. Sanjeev, Indians are actually leading big tech companies outside the country, big companies outside the country. Why not in India? Why don't we have that kind of scale and size in India? Is this brain drain, if we look at it that way, is it not?
Well, I wish my expatriate cousins very well. Let them do well. Why should we not celebrate them? Having said that, we are also seeing them succeed in India. The problem is that for some reason we have in our mind that we shouldn't celebrate them. Despite this, let me say there is a lot of interesting effort and entrepreneurship that is happening. Look at the new companies that are emerging. Ola, Oyo, and it's not because I like the letter O, they're Zomato, and you know, you name it. There are so much entrepreneurship happening. How can you even imagine that we are not doing it in India?
You know, Sriram, you've looked at India from outside. You've looked at India from the lens of Kautilya, and you've looked at India from what it can bring as well. You're sitting in, the East Coast of the United States of America. What gives you hope, and what scares you?
That's a great question. I think as a proud Indian, I find a lot of things to be optimistic about. Our civilizational strength. Very few countries in the world, have such civilizational sort of history and culture and a huge civilization to sort of propel them forward. I think digital technology is something very exciting. This is the way it's sort of permeated in India is something that every Indian has to be proud about. And also the dynamism of the young and even the old. The population is very inspiring. And I think these things are something that I really sort of look forward to and very positive about. then there's nothing that sort of scares me, but perhaps the impact of AI.
Well, interesting there you say artificial intelligence, and that is what many economies are banking on to leapfrog to the next level of growth. But Sanjeev, final word to you, and this is our bigger question. We're talking about a 5 trillion economy by 2025, but what next? What will bring us to $10 trillion perhaps?
Clearly, we would have preferred to have reached it by 2025 as originally planned, but I think we will be I still think we will be about no more than 18 months behind schedule, maybe 2 years behind schedule at most. So I think we are still on track to hit that. I think by the end of the decade, we will be closing in on 10.
All right, Sanjeev, Sriram, thank you so much for joining us here. Hope to speak to you in 25 years from now when it is India at 100, maybe at the 60th season of Mad About Markets. Both Ritu and I will continue to be as mad about markets. Thank you for joining us and giving us a glimpse into what India looks like in the future. With that, we wrap up on this edition. Have a happy Independence Day.
And see you same time next week.